I'm Bill Bishop. I'm the Big Idea Coach. And I started being an entrepreneur more than 40 years ago. So I started my business before personal computers, before the internet, before social media, and before artificial intelligence. I've evolved my business more than 15 different versions in the last 40 years. And I'm amazed, really, that I've been able to do that because essentially what I did was like all entrepreneurs, I keep creating something out of nothing. And, every day as an entrepreneur, you got to create something out of nothing. And this is something that you can learn to do. Okay. And I have these six sort of habits I use. I call them entrepreneurial activators that I'm going to explain in this presentation. And it's called the Whitewater Way. And I use the analogy of whitewater rafting. So think of the marketplace, think of the economy, think of time as a river, okay? And it's moving along very quickly, and there's a lot of rapids and so on. And you're in a boat, right? And the boat is your business, okay? And your life, but your business and your life. And the key to steering when you're whitewater rafting is to keep paddling. And you got to keep paddling because you got to be moving faster than the river. And that way, it's the only way that you can steer around the rocks and so on. So, this is a good a metaphor for being an entrepreneur because when you're an entrepreneur, you got to keep paddling. Essentially, you have to be faster than time. You have to stay ahead of time. Always have to be moving faster than time. Now, that sounds very strange, but essentially, it means that you need to be forward thinking. You need to be thinking about where things are going and always moving into the future. So that's why I call my company the Big Idea Company, and we help people build the future business of their dreams. I always say we got to lean into the future. So in this presentation, I'm going to talk about these six entrepreneurial activators. These are the things that I've done over the last 40 years to keep creating success out of nothing, essentially. So this is really you're going to get the benefit of hearing from someone that's been an entrepreneur now for 40 years. And I'm hoping at least to be an entrepreneur the next 20 or 30 years. So we'll see how it goes. But I'm going to continue to use these activators. So in this presentation, I'm going to teach you these six activators. And I think when you get your head around this, it's going to take your success as an entrepreneur to a whole other level because you're going to be very, very deliberate now about what it means to be an entrepreneur and what you have to do to keep creating success out of nothing. So I hope you'll join me now for my presentation called The Whitewater Way. What does it really mean to be an entrepreneur? How have I actually been successful as an entrepreneur? Because there was never a guarantee by any means. I I started off being an entrepreneur about 40 years ago, and I'll talk more about this. I started a magazine. It's called the Uptown Magazine, and uh, that was my first real business that I had, and it was extremely exciting. I made it was very stressful, and it was incredibly fun, and I made a bit of money, but it launched me on the path to being an entrepreneur. So I've really been an entrepreneur now for 40 years. And then I went and got a job for a little while and I realized I hated that. And then I went back to being an entrepreneur. So I had a little period there where I got a little nervous and I thought maybe I should get a job, but that notion didn't last very long. I realized that I couldn't really have a boss. I was just, frankly, I was just kind of moving faster than they were. And I just didn't want to sit around. I wanted to keep moving forward and they weren't doing that. Um, so anyway, so I was thinking about what it meant to be an entrepreneur. Um, and there were six things that I realized that you need to constantly doing um, when you're an entrepreneur to really to be successful. And these are the things that I've been doing, maybe unawares actually in a lot of ways, but I've been doing for 40 years that has helped me be, I believe, successful as an entrepreneur. My notion was being successful as an entrepreneur was, I was just able to keep going and keep doing what I love doing. And, I've made a fair bit of money from it, but that wasn't ever really the point. Right. And, but one of the things that I've realized was when you're an entrepreneur, you always have to stay ahead of the game. You always have to stay ahead of time in a sense. Okay. So you can't be lagging. You have to be leading. And so I think of time as like a river, right? So time is a river. It's always flowing. Um, it doesn't matter what you do, it's always going to keep flowing, right? So if you get out of the river is going to keep flowing. You have no control over that whatsoever. So if you want to think of time then as also the marketplace, the economy, how things are changing, how new technology is always being introduced, how your customers are always changing, how you're always changing. That river is always flowing, okay? And sometimes it goes fast, sometimes it goes slow, but it's always flowing, okay? And then, I started thinking about that river idea, and then I thought, the key is that you've got to stay ahead of that. You got to stay ahead of that, because I had a friend. I actually have not done whitewater rafting myself, so just a disclaimer here. I don't know if I ever will actually, but I had a friend who ran a whitewater rafting company in Ottawa, and so he told me all about it. And he said one of the key things you need to keep doing, which these people in this picture are not doing that right at that moment. I guess they just got to the end. Is that you got to keep paddling. You always have to keep paddling, because if you don't keep paddling, you can't steer. Okay, so you always have to be staying just that much, going that much faster than the river in order to be able to steer. If you stop paddling, then you have no control over the boat whatsoever. You have no control whatsoever. You can just get thrown around and thrown into the rocks. You can't steer around the rocks because you're just being taken up with the river. So most people are not paddling. They're not going faster than time. They are always just sitting in the boat, uh, being swept along by time, and that's why they keep hitting rocks, and they keep getting tipped over, because they haven't kept paddling into the future. And so I thought it was kind of an interesting analogy. I don't know how you feel about that, but I thought that's really what I've been doing myself and trying to help other people to do, is say we got to always be paddling faster than time. Okay, we got to keep ahead of everything. Um, Now that sounds tiring, um, but it's a very exhilarating, and that's why people do whitewater rafting, because it's very, very exciting, right? But rule number one is you always got to keep paddling, or this could be a problem. Okay, so then I started thinking. I thought, well, that's a pretty good analogy here. But what does it actually mean to keep paddling when you're an entrepreneur? Because that's a metaphor, right? Like, what does it actually look like to do that, right? And I started writing things down and realizing, well, there's actually 6 things that I've always continued to do that's enabled me to keep moving forward, right? And these are, I call them entrepreneurial activators, or entrepreneur activators. These are things that are actions that you can take as an entrepreneur that other people should take too, but especially when you're an entrepreneur. Most people are not entrepreneurs, so this doesn't really apply to them, although it could. But it's mostly important for entrepreneurs. What do these activators look like? And there's 6 of them. And this is really helpful, because in the next meeting, and we're going to do the worksheets. I've made a worksheet for each one of these activators, and I did it yesterday. I did the exercise myself and wrote down all the things that I wanted to do in these areas, and it was an excellent way to just keep moving my business forward by thinking this through. What can I do this week, right, in these 6 areas? So the 6 areas are ideate, initiate, optimize, leverage, harmonize, and evolve. Okay. And so ideate is coming up with ideas, initiating is starting things, optimizing is making things work better, leveraging is about, scaling really, Harmonizing is about making everything work together, and evolving is about going to that next level. Always think I just got to keep going to that next level with whatever I'm doing. So if you think of your business as being in the river, right? The whole business is one big river. So it's big river that we're all in. And that's the economy. That's the marketplace. That's our business is in the river. Um, the other way you can look at it too is that you have all these smaller rivers that you're in as well, like these projects you're doing, the very specific projects. So in my business, we have about 9 different real areas of our business, and each one of them is a river, right? So there's a giant river, but there's also these 9 sort of sub rivers as well. So you can apply this to those particular smaller rivers as well. And of course, by the time they all join up, it's just the one big river again, right? So they don't want to overdo the analogy, but it's kind of helpful, right? To think of it this way. Okay, so let's start with ideate. That's where it all starts. So it's the spark of innovation. And that's why, of course, I've called my company the Big Idea Company, because I think that's where it all starts every time. And so what we keep coming up with, hopefully, as entrepreneurs, is new ideas, right? New ideas for helping people, new ideas for helping ourselves, new ideas for our business. These could be big, huge ideas, right? Like you're going to create this whole new kind of business and change the world. And it could be a small idea, like I'm going to get a new car or something, right? Like it can be anything, but this is imagining the future and it being different than it is now. Okay. And why does this even have to be here? Well, because most of us don't actually in the world spend much time on this, right? We're just kind of being swept along by the river, and that's kind of it, right? We're not thinking about how things could be different, how things could be better. And that's it. That's because basically our culture and our education system hasn't encouraged that. If you have an idea, you want to keep it to yourself because people will probably shoot it down. Um, you think, well, I can never do that. There's no way I could do that. Why even bother dreaming, right? Okay, and so I think that's a real shame. So this is why I've really built my whole business around saying to people, well, what's your big idea for the future of your business? What's your big idea for your future? What does that look like? And they go, I don't know. And I go, okay, well, we don't have to stop there. We can start thinking, well, what would it be? What would it be in the future if things were better and different? What would you really want? And boy, oh boy, if people don't struggle with that. And it's just because they haven't exercised that muscle. Um, but that's actually one of the muscles that makes us human, right? Like, um, my dog has ideas. Okay, I think my dog has an idea that she wants to chase the squirrel or something, but it's kind of reactive. And so, but we can be proactive and say, okay, I want to make the world different for myself and others, and I want to spend time having ideas, and coming up with them. Now, a lot of people don't even bother coming up with ideas because they feel like I have all these ideas and never do them. So why do I bother? It just seems like a silly thing to keep coming up with ideas and never doing them. But it's because they don't have these other activators. So we'll get to that in a minute. But so I'm really encouraging everyone to say you want to have as many ideas as you can. Write them all down, and you're never going to do all of them. But even just having one idea might lead to another idea, and the third idea from that might be the most amazing idea ever. So, um, and no, and the other thing too is that I encourage you to do that with your clients. So, with your prospects and your clients, is they help them articulate new ideas for the future. This is what the world's going to be asking us to do more and more. Is we can't just stay in the place that we're in right now. And it is because that river I'm talking about is actually speeding up because of AI and everything else. Like the river is going faster, it's becoming more treacherous. And so we need new ideas. Like we all need to be coming up with those all the time. So if you can help other people do that, you're going to be quite valuable in the marketplace. Okay. So I ideate, I come up with ideas. That's kind of the key thing. And we're all capable of doing it. It's just that we haven't exercised that muscle enough. So I just give you a couple of examples of ideas that I had and how I kind of got them started. So you all probably know my story about um, winning the lobster contest, right? So the story was I was in journalism school, and I guess I was going to be a journalist, and I was working at the keg at night to pay for school, and uh, and that was actually the more important thing that I was doing because I won the lobster contest. Um, and that ultimately ended up being a book and so on. But while I was there, I thought, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to go work at a newspaper or something, And then I had this idea. I said, well, we could start a magazine for this whole part of Toronto, which was around Yonge and Eglinton, if you know Toronto. And we called it the Uptown. It wasn't downtown; it was Uptown. But there, it was a huge area with lots of restaurants, lots of retailers. So I said we could start a magazine for this area. Now I was 25 years old at that point. It's typically not something a 25-year-old's going to do. But I thought, you know what, we can do this, right? So the very first thing we did was come up with the name. So we called it the Uptown, and I said, well, we should register that. So we went to register that as a business. So it cost like $50, which at the time was a lot of money for us to do. But we said that's the first initiating thing. We're just going to come up with a name. And then over 6 months, we developed the magazine. We sold all the ads in the magazine, and we published this very first edition, which was in black and white. The other editions came after, were in color, but that was the very first one. And that was the beginning of me being an entrepreneur. Was that idea? Then I can tell you there were people around me say, that's never going to work. You're too young, one for one, never going to work. Nobody needs another magazine, and so on. Actually, the thing about that magazine was that because the way we did it, is that we actually made a profit on the very first magazine. So we always made a profit. And no one had ever done that in publishing before. They thought, well, it'd have to take like 5 years before you even remotely make a profit. And I said, no, we're going to make a profit on the first one. And so that was a great experience. I learned so much from that. So it started just with that idea. And I remember the first thought I had was, oh, we'll call it the Orange. I don't know, just some crazy name. We'll call it the Orange or something. And I thought, okay, that's working name. So that lasted for about a week. And then I said, no, we'll call it the Uptown. Orange is too weird, but Uptown. So I'm thinking back to how that all got started. And it all started with, I could start a magazine, right? Now, another time that from humble beginnings, I had an idea. I said, well, uh, we should teach people about internet marketing, digital marketing, right? And no one had ever actually used that word digital marketing before. Like I really am the person who came up with that name. And so this is back in 1994. I wrote this little booklet. So it's 24 pages long. It's just a small booklet, but it was to say, this is how you do marketing in the age of the internet. But I thought it's more than the internet, it's digital technology. And I wrote this booklet, and then I just sent it out to everybody. And we got all kinds of business from that particular booklet. So I actually met somebody recently and said, I still have that booklet. It was crazy. I said, maybe a little out of date now, but the principles are pretty well the same, I guess. But that was when I just had this idea. We should help people with digital marketing. And then I said, we need something to establish ourselves as experts. So we wrote that booklet. So it didn't take that long to do, right? But that led to strategic marketing for the digital age, because I took that booklet and I shopped it around to publishers, and I said, somebody should write a book about internet marketing, and it should be me. So here's the booklet. We could turn it into a book. And they said, fine. So HarperCollins, I signed a contract with them, and I wrote this book. And it was the first book on internet marketing, digital marketing in the world. And it really, once again, started from the single idea was, okay, well, we should teach people about digital marketing, and we should start it by doing a booklet. And then one thing led to another. We ended up with a book. And that then took me all over the world doing speaking. I ended up in places. I ended up in Europe. I ended up in the Middle East. all over the United States and North, Canada. And I was, thought of as that point as the expert in internet digital marketing. So that was a very, very exciting thing. But how did all that excitement start? It was because I had that idea, right? And then I acted on it. That was, I guess, the key thing here I'm trying to talk about. So I was always, once again, here trying to stay ahead of time, right? So what's the future look like? Let's get ahead of it here, right? That's really, really important. Okay, so the second activator is initiate, and this is actually the most important one. I don't know if you've read the book by what's his name now? Anyway, it's called Poke the Box. Anyway, anyway, so I read that book, Poke the Box, and it was talking about initiate, and I thought that's a very good way to say it, is that we need to initiate, right? And Seth Godin, sorry. And anyway, so initiate. So this is also key to being successful as an entrepreneur. It's actually ultimately the one, because there are people who have lots of ideas, and they're great at that, but then they never do them, right? Because then they just want to keep thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it. And the more you think about it, the more you talk yourself out of it, by the way. But anyway, but we don't want, stop thinking, don't try, do, or whatever. And let's do something. So that's why, like with the Uptown magazine, was smart. I said, let's go and register that company, because that's an easy, small step to do, right? Let's register the name. Now, that actually turned out to be an extremely important thing that we did, okay? And the reason is, in this case, is that once we got the magazine, we were just about to publish the first issue, and we got this letter from a lawyer saying cease and desist, okay? Because there was other magazine that was starting, and it was called the Uptowner magazine, okay? And the guy said, in the letter said, you stole our name, and you need to stop using that name. And I was freaked out. I thought, okay, it's going back to the orange now, But I thought, well, I'll take it to my dad's lawyer. So I took it to my dad's lawyer, and he did some research. He says, well, you actually registered your name 4 months before they did. So in fact, they actually stole your name, if you want to look at it that way. So he went to see that guy. We're just these young guys. He's like this older guy. He's put like $1 million into this magazine he's going to start, right? He's going to make a profit in 5 years or something. And we're sitting there going, well, our lawyer said that we actually registered our name, and that we could actually sue you and stop you from doing it, but we don't care. You can keep that name. It'll be a little confusing, but we just want to make sure you know that we didn't steal your name. And so he was like he had a bird in his mouth or something at that point. Anyway, he went out of business after 6 months. Okay, so that was moot ultimately. But the smart thing was that we initiated, right? If we had waited, then he would have registered his name first. So whatever you do, you want to get going, because somebody else may be having a similar idea at that moment, right? So you want to initiate. Now, initiate can be anything, but every day when you're working in your business, you want to be initiating things. Okay. Now, it could be because you have this big idea and you want to initiate that, or you want to be initiating more steps in that project, right? And so, what are initiations? Well, you're spending some money, like going out physically, going down to the government office, spending the $50 and doing that paperwork and getting it done, right? It's like making that effort. And that's not going to pay off right away. And you're not going to get any kind of big profit from that, but you're working on it for the future, right? Contacting people that you've never contacted before. I can think of so many times that I've gotten business because I just put myself out there and contacted someone. A couple of years ago, I was on LinkedIn, and somebody said, we're putting on the EO conference in Quebec City in June. And so I just sent a message in that LinkedIn post. I said, you should have me come and speak, because I can talk about AI. And the woman got back to me.
Have an answer for that.
Women got back to me, and they hired me for the speech. I did the speech. I got like 20 clients from that. And that was just from that one outreach on LinkedIn, right? Just like that. So contacting people, doing something you've never done before, right? Just going somewhere you've never gone before, joining something you've never belonged to before, committing to something that you've never committed to before. So this is definitely about doing something new, right? That you've never done before. And we're not very good at that either as human beings, actually. That's not why we tend to be. We get very habitual, we get in our rut, and we don't do new things. So that's when you stop being an entrepreneur and you start being a manager. You're just kind of managing the status quo. You stop paddling. That's when you start hitting the rocks and possibly drown, right? Take other people with you. So these initiators are really, really key. Now, sometimes it can be scary to do it, but I'll give you an example. So when I had that job and I realized I didn't want to do it, I said, I'm going to go back to publishing, but I'm just going to publish my own magazine. I'm going to publish other people's magazines. And I'm going to use Apple technology to do that. But I needed a laser printer. So I dug up this picture of the laser printer. It's called the Laser Writer. I remember picking it up and how much it weighed. It was, many, many pounds, incredibly heavy. And it was $15,000. That's back in 1986 money. But it was the whole deal for me. Like because I had that printer and initiated that investment, I got hundreds of $1,000s worth of contracts because I had the technology. Other people didn't have it. I knew how to use it. Example, I got Kodak as a client. We got all of their publications because they said, look, we can do your publications twice as fast for half the money than the way you're doing it now. And it's all because we have this technology, right? And Kodak didn't want to invest in it, surprisingly. But so we did, and we got the business, right? So, and many other contracts too, because we had that. Another initiation that I made was I was reading this magazine, this little tech magazine, and they were talking about bulletin boards, BBS bulletin boards, and I thought, what's a BBS bulletin board? And it's kind of like AOL, but sort of a private bulletin board, like CompuServe. I don't know how any of you remember that, but anyway, so bulletin board. Oh yeah, I can have my own bulletin board. I could run my own bulletin board on my computer, and people could log into it and so on. So I invested in that technology. It wasn't that expensive. But I initiated that and I built I built a BBS system, bulletin board system on my Mac. And then I got my clients connected to it. And then one thing led to another, and we created the big BBS system. And that was that was like the version of what we're doing right now, but before the web. Okay. It was like we were all connecting to this one node that I had set up. And what I did was I sent out a press release about that network. So I initiated that. So let's just send out a press release, see what happens. We'll just tell them we've got this bulletin board for small business people. People can log into it. And the Toronto Star, the Toronto Globe and Mail, the National Post, all the big newspapers in Canada, they all published the news release on the front page of their business sections. And we got thousands of people signed up like within a matter of a week. Like literally, it was unbelievable how many people signed up, and it wasn't easy for them to sign up because they didn't know what they were doing. But then that led to us building bulletin boards for Hockey Hall of Fame, the Board of Trade, Toronto Board of Trade, the Canadian Publishers Association, the Life Underwriter Association of Canada, all kinds of business built out of that from that one press release. So that was, I put the paddle in, I paddled, and I set the press release, and all that stuff happened just from that one thing that I did, right? And so this is why I keep looking back and going, like, how did those things happen, right? Well, they happened because I did something new, and just staying one step ahead of everybody else, and that's why it worked, right? Without me doing that, none of those other things would have happened, right? Okay, so the third thing is optimize. So I use Apple Notes, and in Apple Notes I have a folder, and the folder is called optimizers. So I have an optimizer for, say, business optimizers, personal optimizers, and then the personal one's broken down the business ones are broken down, but I have all these things. I keep thinking, how can I optimize all these different areas of my life and my business, right? So then I think, so I, like, for example, just an easy one, is I play tennis a couple times a week, and I go, okay, how could I optimize that experience, right? So I just plotted out, okay, get up at 5:30, do a warm up for 20 minutes, right? Make sure I have all my clothes ready before that. I just go through it. I'll have the water bottle ready, a new can of balls, and I just kind of walk through the whole thing. And it's made my tennis experience better, playing better too. But the thing is that it was just step back and say, okay, that's a process that I use. I do playing tennis. How can I optimize that? And none of it was rocket science. It was just thinking through, how can I optimize that particular thing? So then I go, okay, well, in business, we have our program, Big Idea Adventure. How can we optimize that in all the ways that that can be done? And so the more that we work on those optimizers, the easier it gets to run that particular part of our business, right? Very, very powerful notion is to sit back and say, okay, take areas of your business, take areas of your life, and saying, how can I optimize that, right? And of course, I've used a lot of AI now in doing that, right? I say, okay, well, how could AI, I always say, well, how could AI be used for optimizing that particular part of my business or part of my life and so on? And that's when you start thinking of it that way, the AI becomes incredibly useful. Like, it's incredibly useful because you're not changing the world, you're just changing your world, and making it better, right? But of course, you can also be helping other people optimize their experience too. So optimizers, right? Then we have leverage. So leverage is a little different than optimizers, because leverage means that this is how we're going to scale ourselves. So leverage. So I'll give you an example of that right now. We have a network called the 10% Speaker Network, and we have now 400 members in that network. And the way we got from 300 to 400, well, actually, the way we got from 0 to 300 is myself and another fellow worked on the marketing of that ourselves, right? So we figured out how to do the marketing, get people in it. So we figured that we optimized that process to a very fine degree, like it really worked, okay? And then I hired a company in the Philippines to now take that over, right? So they were able to just take the system that we had optimized, do exactly the way we figured it out, and then they uh, um, are doing great. So they went from, like, literally in 2 months, we've gone from 300 to 400, right? And I haven't had to do anything now. They just send me reports and say it's all happening, right? So I got to that point. I go, now I'm going to leverage this by having someone else take that system that I optimized and do it. The mistake people make is they delegate too quickly. They try to leverage too quickly because they haven't done the other steps yet, right? And because they haven't done the other steps, they're handing off an unfinished process that's not really necessarily going to work, trying to give someone else it. So you're going to waste a lot of time, money, and effort on that. And then that's not going to be good, because then you'll have to go back to square one again and figure out how it works. And you'll think, oh, it doesn't work because they didn't do a good job. Well, no, because you didn't give them the optimized system to do, right? So if you can be always thinking about, how can I leverage this? So I'm having a meeting with them today, the same people, to take another process that we have, and I'm going to give them that to do as well. And because they're in the Philippines, it's frankly really inexpensive to have them do it, right? It's like a crazy the results we're getting for the money we're paying for that. But I've given them something that really works. So leverage. Next one is harmonize. And this is when it really starts to come together, because you have all these rivers, you have all these different things you're doing, and you say, I really want there to be harmony here. And harmony, if you think of it, it's just like the sense of beauty, right? I always say you want to sort of make your business like a work of art. You're trying to say, I want it to all to fit together. I want it to all look beautiful, not just graphically, but just how everything operates, right? Just that it's a beautiful thing. Like I always say, people say, why don't you want to retire bill from your business, And I say, well, because I would go start raving mad if I retired, but mostly I said it's because I've created this beautiful thing, you know, and why would I want to now just throw that away? Like that would be crazy, right? So it's always been my objective to make the business as harmonious as possible. You can't make it perfectly harmonious, right? But to have everything work together, have everything fit together, and take out anything that's extraneous, and just have the things that are harmonious there. So that way we're aligning the people, we're aligning our strategies, our process, and technology. Um, so the most important thing with that is just to have that as part of your goal. Because I've seen a lot of people just think, oh, business has got to be a crazy, hectic, stressful thing. And I go, no, no, that's actually a bad business. That's not a good business. A good business is harmonious business, right? Um, like I think of Apple. I don't know what goes on behind the scenes. I'm sure that there's a lot of things that are not harmonious about the company, but as far as how they present everything to the public, how they packaged everything fits together. I mean, if you look at Apple and you go to their stores and everything, go, this is such a beautiful thing. Like it's just amazing, right? Like everything fits together. Everything. That's what they're trying to do anyway, right? Like not perfectly, but that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to make everything work together, everything to be a beautiful thing, right? So that's aspirational, right? And then we have evolve. Okay, so as we're going along and we've had an idea, right, and then we initiated it, and then we optimized it, and we leveraged it, and and so on. And we made this harmony. That's when you got to say, okay, now I got to go to that next level again, because harmony being the last one is that's wonderful, but that's when we can get into la la land now. Okay, it's like, okay, I've created this beautiful thing. It's beautiful. Well, now you have to go into the next level of discomfort. You have to go to that next point where you say, now I got to go to another river that's even faster rapids, that has even more challenges, um, because that's what's going to keep you going, right? And that's what you're capable of doing. So what's that next level of evolution, right? Now, the other way I kind of say it sometimes, I say whatever you're doing ultimately becomes a hot dog stand, okay? Because you've just built a system, you've got it figured it out, you know how to do it. You could give someone else to run the hot dog stand, but at that point, you got to go, well, I want to be gourmet chef now. What is that going to be? Okay, I'm not comfortable with that. I don't even know if I can imagine myself being that, but that's what I know I'm capable of. I got to do that. What's the next thing? The next level, going from hot dog stand to gourmet chef. What is that going to look like, right? Um, and that also really keeps you going, because you can say, okay, I'm going to keep running the hot dog stand, no problem. But I'm going to, I would say, spend 89% of your time on that, 11% of your time on that new vision, working on that new thing that you're trying to figure out that takes everything to a higher level, right? So I always say a big idea is something new, better, and different that takes everything to a much higher level that people will only be able to get from you. So much higher level, right? Um, and obviously a lot of people are not going to do that, right? But that's your competitive advantage, because if you're the one that does that, then you've left them behind, right? They're not paddling anymore, right? So look out with that, right? Even Kodak, right? I've told that story many times. My photographer bought a digital camera in 1995. We showed it to the president of Kodak. So what do you think? He says, no one's ever going to want that. It's too expensive, blah, blah, blah. I went, all right, bye. Well, he had stopped paddling, right? Kodak had stopped paddling. Look what happened to them, right? And I go, I'm not going to do that, right? It's the future. So that's why, uh, artificial intelligence, I use ChatGPT mostly. So that's why I'm putting it up there. But there are many others platforms. That's why this is like, throw myself right into there, right? It's like, that's the next level. What's my business going to look like using AI? What's my industry going to look like using AI, right? That's the next evolution, yeah, obviously, right? So we're all going to go through that. Everyone is going to be asked to evolve, right, to that next AI economy. Many people will not do it, right? Many people already making it very clear they're not going to do it. Okay. But they stop paddling. So they're going to hit the rocks, and it's unfortunate, but and they've gotten lots of warning here, right? Lots of warning. So we don't want to be those people. Now, the other thing I've done is actually that picture doesn't look very good. Anyway, I won't worry about that right now. Is that the Vision Pro? Okay, so I invested in that. So a lot of people say I wouldn't invest in it. Just fix that in. Here we are. We're going to optimize this image here just while I'm at it. Real time optimizing. Let me fix that. There we go. There we go. See, I can do that. This is my show. Somebody knocked that over. I spent $6,000 Canadian on that. Okay, at least it's not $15,000 a laser printer, but I've been using it, and I'm still trying to work out, how it works and so on. But I can tell you that that's the future. Okay, that's version 1. It's $6,000. But I'm telling you, going forward, this is not going away. This is going to become more and more important as a thing, because just what I've done with it has already kind of blown my mind. Okay. And it's blown my mind, not because of exactly what it's doing now, but what I can tell it's going to be able to do in the future. And essentially, what I've learned already is that basically we're all going to just we're not going to have computers, screens. We might have a computer, I guess, but maybe the item is a computer. But yeah, let's say no computer, no screens, no iPhone, just this headset or whatever version, whatever it looks like in the future. It'll all be virtual. There won't be any need for any of those devices anymore. It'll all just be right there in front of you in a much higher quality than you could ever get with anything you have now. So that's not even sci-fi. That's just what's going to happen. That's why Apple is so into it, because they can see that that's where things are going, and they want to be the ones. So this is the version of the $15,000 digital camera that we showed the president of Kodak, right? And it's fascinating. Go on to YouTube. You can find hundreds of people say, this is the stupidest product. It's going to fail. It's too expensive and all that. Yeah, well, I'm just hearing the president of Kodak talking there. Okay. So I'm not saying you should go out and do this, but what I did was I said, here I am at this point in time. This is the next thing. I'm going to fork over that money in order to do that. I'm going to learn all about this, to be one of the people to understand how this is all working, right? So, like I say, I'm not suggesting you use it or anything. I'm not trying to say that, but I want to use it as an example of making that kind of leap, right? And you can wait. You can wait till it's the third version or something, and it's cheaper. That's what I was thinking of doing, and I thought, no, don't be third version guy. You want to be version 1 guy, because the version 1 guy knows way more when we get to version 3 than version 3 person does, right? They're way behind the 8 ball. Just like with that laser printer, right? I could have waited till the laser printers got cheaper and cheaper, but I wouldn't have got the contract with Kodak, because I wouldn't have had the equipment, right? So version 1 of the laser printer got me hundreds of $1,000s worth of business, right? Haven't quite figured out how to monetize the Apple Vision Pro yet, but we'll figure that out as we're going along. Okay, so we're going to leave this is a focus on initiation. That's the key thing. I think a lot of you have lots of big ideas already. We've talked a lot about them. Now we need to initiate. So the motto here is think big. We have the vision, big idea. Start small. What's something you can do today to get that new thing going? What is that new thing? So stop thinking about it now. The idea, start doing. What is that thing that you can do? Who are you going to call? What are you going to invest in? And you don't have to invest $15,000. It might only be $50, but you're going to say, I'm going to invest in this. And you're going to feel so good that you did that, right? Or you're going to, it has to be something that in a way just feels like eating a frog, if you know that expression. It's like, oh God, I don't know. Okay. Because now you're committing to this activity, right? It could be at the bottom of Mount Everest. I'm going to climb Mount Everest. I'm going to climb Mount Everest. Well, what do? Well, you go out, you buy all the equipment, and you sign up for the date when they're going to start taking you up the mountain. That's what you do. People, I say, you should do a webinar to introduce your new thing. Oh, yeah, okay. And I say, what's the date you're going to do it on? And they go, date? You mean I have to set a date? Yeah, well, you're going to have a webinar, aren't you? Well, yeah. Well, let's set a date. Oh, I don't know. I get them to put it in the calendar. I say, put that in the calendar for a month from now. And then you're going to tell everyone you're having a webinar on that day, right? Okay. And then they go, okay, and they're scared, but they do it. And then that day comes, they have the webinar, and it turns out to be successful in some way. And they go, oh, great. I go, book another one. So these are the things, like we go, okay, I want to do it, but maybe I'll start tomorrow. And you know how you feel about yourself when you do that? You don't feel good. You feel like, I don't know how you feel, but you don't feel good. Okay. But if you initiate, you feel great. You feel great. Okay. Now, this can be in any aspect of your life, right? But you say, what am I going to do today that I'm going to initiate, right? What am I going to do differently, right? What am I going to do? I'm going to just go out and go downtown and go to a place that I've never been to before. Do anything you can do that's just different, that might lead to the next, to you having that big idea happen, whatever that is, right? Like I say, going to the government office and registering that business, going down to the Apple store and buying the expensive computer, going online and downloading that software for the BBS, like sending out that press release, right? What are those things that you're going to do to initiate, right? And then you can also, that could be part of your business. Like I think, maybe there's the consultants out there that's what they specialize in, is we got to keep you moving forward, right? I think we could all be that to help other people too, right? Because if you got a big idea, just move forward with it. And the other thing is that's why I call it an adventure, because you initiate and then you initiate again. Now you might invest in something and then find out it doesn't work. It's not going to help you. But then you've learned that it doesn't help you. So you actually learn something. Then you realize, oh, what I really should do is this, right? And then you do that. So, I could have gone out and registered the Orange as the newspaper, right? And then realized later, oh, that's a terrible idea. Okay, go back and register the Uptown magazine, right? But maybe I had to do the first thing to get to the second thing. So it doesn't mean every initiation is going to be the perfect thing. Okay, that's the other thing you got to realize is it just means that you're active and you keep paddling. You keep paddling. That's the key thing here. And also, it'll keep you young. Okay, it'll keep you young. I have so many friends now at my age that have retired, and they have all, more power to them and everything. But they've taken their oars out of the water. They're just drifting along now. Okay, and I don't see that working, actually. Okay, for most people, that's not working. So we got to keep paddling into the. We got to stay ahead of time. That's how you stay young. Okay, that's how you stay young. So there you go. That's my talk on the Whitewater Way. I think I might turn it into a little book anyway, a little booklet. Right, I'm going to initiate that. Maybe it'll turn into a full-fledged book at some point. But we're all very excited about this idea because it's going to give us lots of direction on how to keep moving forward as entrepreneurs. And when we have the next meeting after this today with the member group, we're going to be working on exercises for each one of these activators. So you'll be able to say, okay, this is what I'm doing right now. It's my vision. This is my initiations I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to optimize. This is how I'm going to leverage. This is how I'm going to harmonize. And this is how I'm going to take things to the next level. So I think it's a really good framework for anyone, but especially for you folks who are entrepreneurs. So